Hi everyone. In this video of Accelerated Chess Dragon, we're going to be looking at a game played between Alexander Alekhine and Geza Moroksi. This was played in the 1931 Bled tournament in Bled, Slovenia, and without further ado, let's look at this game. Alekhine starts by playing d4, and we have d5 by Moroksi. Knight f3, knight f6, c4, and e6. So it's transposed into the queen's gambit declined. Bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, h6, and after bishop h4, bishop e7, and knight c3, we've entered the classical variation of the queen's gambit declined. Castles, rook c1, and c6. So both sides are normally developing, and this is something that you would also see in modern-day chess as well. Bishop d3, a6, and now castles by white. And d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and we have c5 by Moroksi. And instead of playing the move b5, Moroksi instead decides to play c5. And he just wants to perhaps get rid of his c6 pawn in case it becomes backwards. But I think a better course of action to go about this would have actually been to play b5 first, and then after the bishop retreats, say, to e2, then only go c5. And this is probably what was better, but Moroksi plays the move c5, which is kind of a big deal because this allows Alekhine to play the move a4. And a4 completely shuts the idea of b5 down, and now Moroksi has lost his opportunity to play b5. Queen a5 by Alekhine, and now queen to e2. Developing the queen, we have an exchange of pawns, and now if we've only looked at the position from the first 14 moves, we notice that Alekhine has an isolated queen pawn, and Moroksi must do whatever he can to take advantage of that. So knight b6, attacking the c4 bishop, bishop to d3, and now bishop to d7. Just normal development. Knight e5 by white. And here we have rook f to d8 by Moroksi. And Moroksi is just trying to bring his bishop back to e8 in some cases, but he's also just trying to use his rook to eye towards the d4 pawn, and because it's extremely weak, it will be quite useful to do that. f4, reinforcing the knight, and the bishop retreats back to e8. Knight to g4, trying to exchange the knights off, and we have rook takes d4. But this was too much. Probably a better course of action was actually to just defend the knight on f6 by playing knight b to d5. Now, why do I say this? Because when you look at the move that was played in the game, rook takes d4, you'll notice that there's a very easy opportunity for Alekhine to take that easily just destroys Moroksi's pawn structure. And he can just play bishop f6. He could have also went knight f6 check. It doesn't really matter. But after bishop f6, the pawn structure is ruined. Bishop f6, knight f6 check, gf6. That is why if you instead have played the move knight bd5, now if knight takes d5 is played, knight takes d5 would be played, and now bishop takes e7. And after knight takes e7, the pawn structure has not been damaged, but now you're still threatening the d4 pawn. So it's a little bit of an improved variation of what Moroksi went for in the game. Because after knight bd5 is played, now if you take on f6 with check, knight takes f6, and we see that Moroksi is completely fine in this position. And he's getting ready to play rook takes d4 and just win a pawn. So that would have been a better course of action, but instead Moroksi went for the immediate rook captures d4, which I think was a bit too hasty. Bishop f6, knight f6 check, gf6, and knight e4. So after all of the trades, knight e4 is played with the intention of trying to bring the knight into the f6 square. And on f6, the knight would really help moves such as queen g4, and with the queen coming to g8, it could be very useful for white. So rook a d8. Knight takes f6 check, and this is what had to be done. If you try this move knight d7, then you immediately allow moves like queen g4 check, and after this king moves somewhere to h8, rook to f3. And this is winning because the position is so hard for black to defend, and after rook f3 is played, with the inclusion of this rook and this queen and all of these pieces surrounding black's king, and if you compare it to the amount of pieces that black has trying to defend, you'll notice that black doesn't actually have that many pieces that he can use to defend, whereas white can use all of his pieces to attack and defend. So black is in a bit of a worse situation, and if you ever try to play this move f5 to ever win material, then queen h4, threatening the h6 pawn, and if you ever try king to h7, then knight f6 check. And you'll notice right away how weak the position for Maroczy is. The move rook g3 is so easy to play, and it doesn't seem like there's any counterplay for Maroczy whatsoever. So that is why, instead of playing the move knight d7, Maroczy decided to just play rook a8. And now knight f6 check. And here, if you play the move king to g7 to try attacking this knight, white is not going to capture this knight for this bishop on e8 with check, because if you do that, you're giving up your powerful knight for a terrible bishop. So better is just play knight to h5 check, and after the king moves, say, to f8, you could just play the move bishop to b1. Your ideas of infiltrating via rook c7 are introduced, and it doesn't seem like there's really a way for Maroczy to stop any of this. So that is why instead king f8 was played, and we have knight h7 check, further trying to get the attack started. King e7, and now f5. Sacrificing the bishop on d3, but knowing that if you ever capture the bishop on d3 as black, then after f6 check, you're already done as black. You can move the king somewhere to d6, but it will just cost you this rook on d3, and not only are you down the exchange as black, but with the amount of attack that white has, this is not going to be very easy for black. So instead, after f5 was played, rook 8 d6. Now, of course, there is a threat of rook takes d3, because if you try f6, the king can just hide behind the rook. So b4 by white. White is a bit desperate to get an attack, and after b4 is played, it may seem like Alekhine doesn't know what to do and he's just starting to sacrifice pawns. But he has a very clear idea about it. You'll notice that in this position, if black plays the move rook takes b4, then white has the option of just playing the move queen e3. And white couldn't have done that earlier because there was already threats towards this bishop on d3. But now after queen e3, you can notice that there are threats of queen takes h6, followed by queen f8 infiltrating. And black doesn't really have a neat way of solving all of this. Meanwhile, if you play the move queen takes b4, which is what happened in the game, then there's queen e5. And queen e5 could not have been played earlier because there was threats towards the e5 square in general by the queen on a5. So the b4 pawn was actually a decoy, which allows this queen to infiltrate and get into a very powerful square. Knight d7 was played, and queen to h8. This threatens the move f6 check, and it's really necessary to take care of this threat. And in fact, this position is actually okay for black to play, believe it or not. Black just needs to be very careful and make sure that he knows what he's doing. But unfortunately for Maroczy, he played the very big mistake. Best was to just play the move rook c6, and, well, after the move rook takes c6 as white, then after bc6, if you ever think about playing this move f6 check, then after king d8, then there's a way of defending this whole position, and it doesn't seem like you've gained much as Alekhine. But, unfortunately for Maroczy, he played the wrong move. He played rook takes d3. And this is already lost completely, and I encourage you to pause the video and find out how. Okay, so in this position, Alekhine decided to play the move f6 check. And why did he do this? Well, because, of course, if you play the move king to d8, then there's just this nice combination, queen takes e8 check, king takes e8, and rook c8 is checkmate. So, you cannot play that, and after f6 check, the only other move that you can actually try is knight takes f6. But if you do this, then after queen takes f6 check is played, black plays king d7, knight f8, and this is checkmate. And unfortunately, Maroczy didn't have any other way out of this, so after this move, f6 check was played, he just decided to resign the game. And a very nice victory for Alexander Alekhine. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please let me know in the comment section, and stay tuned for more chess.